Hello and welcome to Awe and Wonder AAC podcast. I'm Brenda Del Monte,
I'm Sarah Kinsella.
and today we have a special guest, Jessica Montoya, and we have been friends for a long time. She is a mother of a child with a disability, and we are here to talk about her story, hear her insights, and learn from her experience. So, hello, Jessica. Thanks for coming.
Hi, thanks for the invitation.
So, first of all, I know your story, and so most of our listeners don't. So, what I want you to do is just tell us your child's disability story, so we get a visual of how everything went down in the beginning.
Okay, so my daughter's name is Stephanie. When she was about 7 months old, she had a traumatic brain injury, which led her to be in the hospital for about a year and a half. And so once we were released from the hospital, we had to learn how to use um, a bunch of oxygen equipment, wheelchair training, a bunch of like G tube, everything to pretty much maintain her alive.
Right. So, I know this is super personal, but let's go back to the day of the injury and tell
Hmm.
us a little bit about how you learned your daughter was hurt, how your work handled that. Um, Tell us a little bit about how you learned about her traumatic brain injury.
Okay, so like I said, she was 7 months old when it occurred. I to keep in perspective, I was only 16 at the time, so I was still young, and they were twins, so I had twin girls. And at the time I was working. So when the incident occurred, her biological father was actually there with them. And I pretty much heard the story from his side. Um, and when it had happened, I was at work. So my mom actually came in crying. So I
Mm.
kind of figured something was happening, but I didn't expect it to be that my daughter was in the hospital with
Right.
like a life and death situation, pretty much.
Right.
So I actually tried to leave work, but work said if you leave, you pretty much get fired. So I Oh my said,
Mm.
I'm just gonna leave. I'm not gonna fight between a job or my daughter's life. Like, who would do
Hmm.
that? So then at that time I left and she was at Cardin Children's. So her history, like pretty much her whole life story is at Cardin's, all the surgeries, the initial surgeries, everything is at Cardin's. While there was a point, I want to say maybe like 3 to 4 days after it occurred, the doctors came in at about midnight one day and said that we are gonna have to pull the plug pretty much because she
Wow.
was on life support at that time. Um, and we pretty much said no. My parents were like, no, we're not gonna do it because I didn't really understand much at that time because of my age.
Mm.
And they're like, no, we're gonna hold on to it. Because we're also Catholic, so we did like the emergency baptism, and we were praying for her all night and everything until the next morning she ended up waking up, so she had a reaction.
Mm.
Wow. Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
the
then
morning after they wanted to pull the plug was when she woke up.
yes, they wanted to pull the plug. I remember it precisely. It was February 18th that they wanted to pull it, and we said, no, they're not going to do it. Um, at about, I want to say it was between 8:30 to 9 a.m., where she ended up waking up. She just randomly woke, she opened her eyes.
Hmm.
Oh my goodness. So we literally just ran to her and we all just started crying, and we had a priest
Hmm.
with us at the time, so and he even started crying.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
bet. I bet. And your
So,
parents were there? Yes,
Yeah.
they would stay with me. If it was not both of them, it would be either one or the other. Because I did have my other daughter with us, so they were kind of my babysitters while they were trying to take care of us at the hospital too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that gives me chills.
Yeah.
So let's back up. You go to the hospital, and Stephanie's nickname is Nani, so I know I'm going to call her Nani half the day. So we might as well just
hmm
establish that Nani and Stephanie are the same person.
Everybody only knows her by Nani.
Right, right. So, so you arrive at the hospital, and Nani's biological father doesn't speak English, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Remind me, were you born here or in Mexico?
I was actually born in Mexico,
Okay.
and I ended up becoming a naturalized citizen.
Okay. So your mom speaks English, but your dad doesn't speak English. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So you get there and you're offered an interpreter, yes?
Yes.
And you refuse because why?
I mainly refused because I actually know English, and then my mom was there as well too. So, and because she's a CNA, she kind of knows like the medical terminology of it. Um, and even though they kind of were forcing an interpreter on me, but my mom kept insisting no, even after I said no. So once my mom actually said no, that's kind of where they backed off a bit.
And is that also because
Interesting.
you just didn't want another person? I mean, you already had these other doctors. You just didn't want one more person in the room?
No, to me, it just kind of seemed like it was too many people trying to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
And then with me being 16 at the time, I really wasn't an open book to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I'd rather keep it like within my family or like within the people that I know or actually trust.
Right, right.
So, Jessica, part of our title today for our podcast, talking to you, is a parent perspective, toxic assumptions. So it sounds like an assumption someone made is that you need an interpreter, and not only that you needed it, was that you didn't know if you needed it because they kept telling you you did, right? That you were too
Yeah.
young to kind of make decisions. Is that correct to say?
Yes. And that kind of goes out throughout like the whole year, almost 2 years that we kind of had to figure everything out with her disability.
Mm,
One, because of my age. So they pretty much assumed that I didn't know anything
mm-hmm,
because I was 16 at the time.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I mean, really, you're going through this for the first time like anyone else would be, right?
Yes.
You you don't know what to expect, just as anyone else would in this situation.
hmm
Yeah.
Right. Even if you're 26, you don't know what the doctors are saying. You don't know what's going on. You still have other children, right? Like in some ways, all of the trauma would be significant no matter how old you are, right?
Yes.
I'm sure it was harder at 16, but it didn't make it. Just because you're 16 doesn't mean that just because of your age doesn't mean that you didn't have the ability to make decisions. I find that was really unfortunate, I think. So they start talking and you are doing interpreting, right? So you are learning about your daughter
Yes.
and then turning and telling her father in and your dad in English.
Yes. hmm
So what was that like for you to learn about it and have to play that role?
At first, I remember when I was translating it, I was just kind of translating it. But then once my dad kind of started like asking questions about it, or kind of like um me trying to explain more into detail what it was, that's when I started kind of getting the bigger picture and kind of understanding what in reality they were trying to say.
Mm-hmm. I know that you said that obviously you're interpreting, so they know you speak English, but they're kind of talking around you and then they're dumbing it down when they talk directly to you. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, when I remember like specific times where they would come in and they would try to talk about like her condition and like the prognosis for her and all that medical talk, what they call it. Every time they try to tell me something, they would always like dumb it down, use like simple words, basic words. Almost kind of made it seem like just because I was 16, didn't I wasn't gonna like understand anything, even though they didn't know me whatsoever,
Mm-hmm.
or even like my parents, because just be it was mostly based because of my age.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
How much of being Hispanic and not everyone speaking English do you think played a role in the dumbing it down part?
I would say about maybe like 80% of that.
Really?
Just because I think in like when obviously like when you because you know my dad, and when you look at my dad, he looks like he's like very Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
But I know like throughout his life, if you talk to him in English, he somewhat understands you.
Mm-hmm.
He just can't speak it back.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know when I was doing a lot of the translating, he would understand way better. And I remember he would always say, "Well, don't let them talk to you like you're a kid. You're already old enough, and Nani's making you grow up.
Mm-hmm.
So don't let them talk to you. Don't let them do whatever they're gonna do because it's not gonna work." So I kept getting like backup, I guess you could say, from my parents as well. They
Mm-hmm.
were kind of like my lawyers at almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were looking out for you for sure.
Yes.
One example of that was using the terminology around being a noodle. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. I remember that one because they said if she was gonna survive, that she was gonna be in, they first said vegetative state. So and my mom, they kind of heard my mom like explaining it a little bit to me, and they're like, well, it's pretty much gonna be a noodle, just soft, not really sturdy, and just laying there.
That's what the
So
doctor told your mom?
that's what the doctor told me, and then the nurse kind of reiterated around that as well too. So that
Mm,
was like their magic word, was saying that she was gonna be a noodle.
right. What was your reaction to that?
I'm like, why would you call someone a noodle? Like, I didn't understand why they would use that. Why can't
Mm-hmm.
they just use like their regular language as if they were talking to somebody like older?
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, they weren't talking to you about the kind of cerebral palsy she was going to likely have and what that would look like in her body and what we do and don't know about her brain. They just reduced it all down to a noodle.
Yeah, they never went into specific details like that
Yeah.
until further down the road, almost a year after.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
So,
So,
also around this time, because there was an injury in the home, CPS got involved.
Yes, CPS got involved as soon as we hit the hospital
mm,
And how much do you think
because
that was related to your age, your ethnicity, or do you think it was just because the injury was in the home?
with that I would say about 80% based on age and like 20% based on ethnicity.
You think so?
I think so because there was one point like when they first got involved, they were talking to me just like how the doctors were,
Mm-hmm.
making doing their simple words, pretty much dumbing everything down. Um, and then as soon as they would tell me one thing, they would say two other different statements, and then they would come back to that original statement, kind of like repeating themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know a little bit after that, I had to get like a psychological evaluation
Mm-hmm.
because they wanted to make sure that I was not crazy, or what they said was that because of my age, they wanted to make sure that I understood everything correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So when I did do that evaluation, I pretty much told the psychologist why I was there, why they sent me, what happened, the pretty much the whole life story.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the session, she's like, "Okay, well, why are you here?"
Mm-hmm.
I responded with, "I don't know. I'm hoping you would tell me."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we just ended it like that, and I never went back. She's like, "I don't know. Your head is on good. We're good to go." I said,
Wow.
"Okay."
So
That is so much to go through.
that's what I'm thinking
Yeah.
too. So your child's on life support. You're trying to get your other daughter in your custody, and they're questioning your sanity.
Yeah. All because I was 16 at the time.
I don't even know who passes the sanity test in those circumstances.
Well, apparently I did.
I know. Good on you. I don't know that I do.
Right.
Anybody, and I don't care about age in that sense, right? But
Right.
I do know that there are rules around injuries in the home with a child, and there are some automatic pieces around child protective services around that. But
Mhm.
I don't think that a psychological profile like what you had to go through is standard procedure. Do you know if that's true, or do you think that is that why you're saying it's mostly age, because that particular piece of this was not common?
I think it was mostly age because they did state that they typically don't do those.
Mm,
But because of my age and because we were so young, that's kind of why they want to, what they said, get it out of the way.
mm, just real quick.
So that's kind of why that's why I lean over to it was age based at that
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Right.
So you passed the test. Your daughter's with you, meaning Nani's twin is back in your custody.
After we did the evaluation and everything, they actually like because they had deemed my mom's home dangerous until they could figure out like what had happened to her originally.
Mm,
We had actually signed custody over to one of my mom's cousins that we never spoke to in years. And
mm,
she actually was able to do that favor for us. And
mm,
because she signed over, I was still able to be with like around the kids and stuff. I just had to have like supervision
mhm,
just until I was
Mm.
cleared.
Wow.
So our my mom's aunt actually let me stay in one of her bedrooms in her home
mhm.
Mm.
with my kids. So that way I would still be taking care of my kids. I would just pretty much like be watched.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a couple things there. One, you weren't even at the house during the when she fell. So
No, I
interesting that
wasn't.
you were being questioned when you weren't even there.
Yes.
Okay. And then
Mm.
the other thing is something about Hispanic culture is your cousin who doesn't even know you is like, absolutely, I'll sign those papers and you can
Yeah.
stay with me. And I
She
love that
definitely
about your
no
whole
hesitation.
family. Yeah. Your whole family has got everybody's back all the time, even if you don't know each other for 5 years or whatever.
Yeah, and what my mom said specifically when it happened, she's like,
Yeah.
"I'm sorry, I have to ask you for this favor, but would you be willing to do it?" She's like, "Well, why are you even asking? Just let me know where I need to sign." Because
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
what she said was family is family, whether you talk to them or not.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you probably, I mean, it's probably reciprocated, right? Your family would do the same
Hmm.
if
Oh,
No
they,
yeah.
question about it.
Yeah.
yeah.
Especially Jessica's the family interpreter.
Oh.
At all. Actually, she's the neighborhood's interpreter.
Yes, and
Everyone.
partially lawyer too now, because apparently I help neighbors like fill out papers that are in English and all that kind of stuff too. So
Oh, yeah.
For
You're
citizenship and
gold.
things. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
She is.
Do you mind doing that, Jessica? Do you like to do it or?
um, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, because then certain things get a little too personal.
Yeah.
But it's like I tell my mom if they ever need help, I can't say no.
Yeah.
Literally can't. And she's never said no
Yeah, Brendan knows that too. I apparently no is not in my vocabulary.
either.
Oh.
It's like sometimes if someone needs you to interpret for something pretty serious, then you're privy to a lot of private information. And that's where you're like, I
Yeah.
hate that for you that you have to tell me this stuff, right?
Yeah. Be like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I know your personal stuff, but I'll
Yeah.
gladly do it.
Yeah, right. That's the part
Mhm.
that's a little hard. Sure.
Yeah.
So, you at this point, so you go home and you get a nurse. Tell us about that.
It was not a fun experience.
Oh,
Hmm.
Yeah, we went home. We were, I think, like 2 days after that, we ended up getting a nurse. Because when she did come home, she came home with an oxygen tank. She came home with a trach, a G tube, AFOs, splints, the whole 9 yards, pretty
right.
much.
Yeah.
There was certain ways that we were able to like move her, certain ways we needed to adjust her. And just like her overall care, we pretty much required like an extra set of hands
Mhm.
and also
Mhm.
scaled hands as well.
Right.
Mhm.
So that's where we ended up getting a nurse. And at first, for the first couple of months, it was okay until they started getting a little too comfortable. It got to a point where they were like asking me if I could like either leave the room or leave the house. But I'm like, okay, so where am I supposed to go if this is like the only place like where I live? Like, why would I leave? And then with a complete stranger in the house too, and then my daughter and like everything she has gone through,
Yeah. Well,
it made me feel super uncomfortable.
what did you do?
Um, so I ended up talking to my mom about it. And she's like, well, just give him a couple more days and see how it goes. And it just started getting more like, well, are you guys able to leave? You guys can go do kind of like they were pretty much trying to get me to like go do things while they were there because they just wanted like that privacy. And I just didn't feel comfortable until I got to the point where I called the agency and I'm like, I don't want them anymore. If they're
Mm.
going to be asking me to like leave my own home
Mhm.
and with my child who's like medically fragile at that point, I was like, I don't want them. I don't want new people. And then to be having to keep like rotating people around and getting used to new people, I'm
Right.
like, no. So we ended up just pretty much terminating those services.
And doing it, you did everything then.
Yes.
You were,
I figured because of the way that they were treating us, to me, it was just easier to just do it all on my own and figure it out versus somebody pretty much like haggling me every time.
do you think that part of that was them trying to help you get time to yourself, or did it just feel really just strange? It was,
To me, being like it being a whole new thing, and then
Mhm.
with people coming in the home, because we would never really have anybody over other than just like family.
Right.
It was completely weird to us. It was
Yeah.
super strange.
Yeah.
Um, as much as we tried to adjust with it, like we really couldn't until it
Mhm.
got to that point where people would say that they like started pushing our buttons pretty much.
Right.
We were just like, no, we're not gonna. It seemed more like a struggle than actually it being helpful.
Right.
but I
Right.
do, I do think you make a good point, Sari. I think you're saying like, was there an assumption that you needed that Jessica needed a break from her daughter and or
Mhm.
needed time away, and
Mhm.
that might be an assumption that was made, and what it came across as
Mhm.
no, I don't need time away from my kid. And I'm certainly
Mhm.
not leaving them with you, because I don't actually know you. I mean,
Mhm.
so, I mean, you trusted them medically to, care for your daughter, but those aren't just because you trust someone medically doesn't mean you're going to leave them in your home with people, right? You have your core people that
Mhm.
you let in your home, period. And she wasn't one of them, you know? So at this point, how are we feeling about white ladies? I know this because this is
Um,
leading up to when I met you, so I have to ask.
Um, Nervous.
Yeah.
Just just because it's people, new people in general. I'm before like when you first met me, I was not an open book.
Yeah.
I always kept to myself,
Yeah.
super quiet. If I don't have to deal with you, I'm not gonna deal with you type of
Mm,
person.
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
So, um, you got a communication device evaluation. I wasn't part of that. Talk about what you saw during that evaluation, what you thought about getting AAC for your daughter.
Um, when they first when I first learned about it, I was a little like, how would I say it? Like a little thrown off guard because I didn't know what it was to begin with,
Mhm.
given that we were learning about a whole lot of different things super
Mhm.
quickly at a young age.
Mhm.
Um, it was it was frightening at first because I had to learn about something completely different.
Mhm.
Never heard about it in my life. And once we did like the eval and they sort of like started teaching me like how to use it and stuff, I kind of felt comfortable with it.
So you
That's
chose
kind of where,
you chose to do the evaluation at the clinic because you were like, I remember the team offered, should we do it in your home or in the clinic? And you said,
mhm.
definitely the
I
clinic.
said in the clinic, yes. I
Yeah.
didn't
No
want
more.
anybody coming to the house. They kind
Yes.
of traumatized me from that whole nursing ordeal.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
no more people.
It's
Right.
like that is your place. That is
Yes, no
And
more
special.
so,
people.
and they trialed eye gaze devices. Yes.
Yes.
And
And how
how
did
old
you
was she
feel when
at
you
this
saw that? So
and
go ahead.
how old was she at this point?
Oh gosh. I don't even remember.
I think two or three, probably
Okay.
I
three.
think she might have been like 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And what was that like? Yeah, trying eye gaze.
At first I thought it was weird because the way like it would track your eyes and stuff, I thought that was just like weird.
Hmm.
Um, and then the fact that it kept watching you because it had to follow your eyes, it just kind of creeped me out at first until like they started telling me about it, kind of describing it, how like the functions of it and everything. That's kind of when it's like, oh, okay, well maybe this might end up working out.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So then you get the device and I get assigned to your training. This is how I met you. And I call you and I say,
Hmm.
yeah, we do it in the home. I have to set it up. And you didn't tell me not to come to your house. Was I just too pushy or what? I didn't give you another option.
Kind of both, I guess.
Fair.
It's just when I kind of remember that a little bit too. Just your voice kind of was calming a bit because you didn't seem like you were pushy either.
Mm,
And then uh after I think after we were making the appointment and stuff, we kind of started talking a little bit about Nani.
hmm.
So that
Mm,
kind of just made me like ease into you a little bit more.
Mm,
hmm.
hmm.
Like she's
So
she's
she didn't seem like she was too aggressive
Mm,
compared to like other people that I've met.
hmm.
right. Or
Hmm.
too much like on her agenda, right? She's actually wants to know about your daughter and have a conversation, maybe.
Yeah, and then she did seem and well, not she did seem, but she was friendly at the time and she still is.
So what I didn't, so I came and we set
Hmm.
up some stuff. And at that time, she had a Tobii Dynavox with eye gaze. And the setup was kind of extensive. I mean, I was there for like, I don't know, an hour and a half or something.
Hmm.
And then I later found out when I left, your mom called you.
Yeah.
What'd she say?
She did call me and she like every time somebody shows up, why was that white person here?
Yeah.
That's literally
Uh,
what she said. I'm like, what she was doing, I pretty much explained why she was at the house.
Yes.
And that's when she kind of started questioning me about the device as well too, that what it
Yeah.
was for.
mhm.
And she was kind of like weirded out too because I had told her that it like tracks the eyes and stuff as well. So she's like, well, how does it do that?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's like after we got more into it, I kind of, whatever I started learning, I would show my mom too.
Mm-hmm.
So we were kind of both intrigued.
Mm-hmm.
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 Did you guys try it?
And we did. We were actually messing with it. We were kind of just tracking our own eyes pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was effective in the training in getting going on it? What was helpful as far as getting started with eye gaze with Nani? Like what did I tell you to do that was helpful? What did I tell you to not do that was also helpful? What was helpful in getting going?
Is that like in regards to like the device itself
Mhm.
or
And just using it with her, yeah.
um I think what was helpful was like the training. It was very thorough. Um, Even though it was extensive, it was to me it seemed like it was simple and easy enough to do on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I know as well when you had left, you had also mentioned that if I had like questions regarding the device, if I didn't know like even just how to turn it on,
Mm-hmm.
I remember you telling me to just either call you or text you
Mm-hmm.
because that's what you were there for, was to pretty much help us through the process.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just having that, or having you like as a backup person or like in case of emergency style,
Mm-hmm.
is what kind of gave us the confidence for that.
Mm-hmm.
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 Jessica, I have to ask, is it um, you know, Brenda will say, text me if this, and a lot of people, it's like you have to call or email or we'll set up a Zoom. Is it easier because of the texting sometimes? Do you do that or?
It is because half of the time I wouldn't like to be like on the phone.
Yeah.
And I know just texting would be okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you got the device. I think I encourage you to just play with her. She picks a toy and then you play. She picks a food and you try it. She was trying some food by mouth at the time. So basically building the device into some daily routines. And she was pretty young. And then she went to preschool. So talk
Mhm.
to me about what assumptions do you think were made about Nani when and her disability related to how smart she was when she entered school?
Well, at first they thought, they made it seem like she didn't, like how would I say, it? Like she didn't have a brain almost.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they would make it seem as if you would talk to her and like she was like in a vegetative state almost. Um,
Like
because
you're talking about the teachers or the kids?
yeah, like the teachers in general.
Mm-hmm.
Because even not just the teachers alone, like everybody that would see her, just because they would either see that she's in a like a wheelchair or like a stroller, like how we used to carry her,
Mm-hmm.
um, they would pretty much just be like, oh, well, she can't do anything
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
just because of the way that she looked.
But the thing is what the listeners don't know is how much facial expression Nani has. I mean,
Yes, she has built it up so much, and now she's very, like, very persistent in her facial expressions
mhm.
and like very determined to try to get her voice out.
Yeah, so
Mm.
it's shocking to me that people would look at her and assume that she didn't have a lot going on because her face is always showing.
Especially with those big old smiles.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so
So
how do you deal with that when you can see, if you brought her to school, you can see that people aren't really understanding who Nani is, what she has, thoughts and ideas, and what do you do?
I remember because she had first started going to a school here in Chandler named San Marcos. Um, I remember her first teacher was like, she was super sweet, like bubbly. She was very friendly. Um, she would reassure me that being like her being in school, She was gonna do like a lot of learning. She would have a lot of fun. That they would treat her like any other kiddo. That it really wouldn't be too different than like other kids in her class because she was in a special needs classroom. Um,
So she wasn't with her sister.
no, she actually ended up starting school like 2 years earlier than her sister. She
Okay.
started at 3, her sister started at 5.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So she kind of got like a head start in her school
Mm-hmm.
because of her disability, I guess you would say.
Right.
So with that teacher, she would give her like activities to do, just like simple stuff like what she would give other kiddos. And she kind of started noticing on her own how Nani would either react or how she would respond to certain things that the teacher would show her. Because
Mm.
I remember her teacher telling me, "Oh, well, I thought she didn't know this or she wasn't familiar with this, but she actually knows a little bit about what I'm talking about."
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
another comment that she had previously as well was she can't speak, but she does try to do something to show like a response towards that question.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So right away on the first day of school, that's when they noticed that she wasn't really a vegetable.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like what the doctors were saying that she wasn't a noodle.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Right.
I did mention to the teacher, they're like, she is not a noodle.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, according to the doctor, she was.
Yeah. So they were starting to see what you knew about Nani, and they were pretty, it sounds like they were pretty vocal about it. Like they would tell you, "Hey, this is what I thought, and now I'm seeing that's not true." Did that feel good to have like that kind of heartfelt conversation, or was it hard to hear? Would you rather them not say that? Or, like, "Hey, I thought she couldn't do
Um,
this, but I'm seeing that maybe she can."
yeah, to me, honestly, it was very like reassuring because at the time, that's when I turned about 17 or so. And after ever like her whole traumatic injury that she had and everything, it kind of made me like safeguard her more.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really hesitant to new things, new people, new everything because of
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So just them like reassuring frequently how she's doing, what she's been up to, what she knows, what she's learning,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of motivated me to get her out more often
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
because of like after she had all that and I went through everything with CPS, lawyers, everything,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of just put up like a wall.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Sure.
So, and then when she started going into school, that teacher like slowly started knocking it down just with everything she would tell me about Nani and what she was learning and what she liked, what she didn't like. Just pretty much opening up her mind and getting her involved with all the other kiddos.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's
So it
awesome.
really did help.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, not a lot of preschool teachers have experience with kids that use eye gaze devices.
Mm-hmm.
So also she was kind of brave and just going, okay, you're right, to use the technology.
Yes, she did. Yes, she
Yeah.
just, I remember she had said, bring it in. We'll do training if we need to, but we'll figure it out together. That's what we're all here for. And one thing that you and her both said was that it takes a village, and it
Mm-hmm.
certainly does.
Mm-hmm. But I remember them saying like, oh my gosh, she knows her colors. Oh my gosh, she knows her shapes. Oh my
Yes.
gosh, she knows her, right? Because once we got the device there, they were like, oh, she's meeting preschool cognitive educational academic milestones, right? Like all
Yes.
other 3-year-olds need to know their colors and shapes, and she does, right? Not to
Yes.
mention that you guys spoke Spanish at home. So
Mm-hmm.
she was having to find those, talk English mostly because The device had Spanish at the time, but I feel like at school they
Mhm.
mostly just use English, which makes sense. I
Yeah.
understand those pieces. But yeah. Now throughout the years you've had different teachers, and some of them
Yes.
have used the device more, some of them have used less, some of them have continued to be shocked at how smart she is, and others see it right
Mhm.
away. Tell us a little bit about your good experience, the best experiences you've had.
So the best experiences I've had so far is that all the teachers are willing to try it.
Mm-hmm.
They're always open to try it. There's no issue about that. Um, they're pretty much just when they see the device, they're amazed at how much content it has
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that it can hold so much. And then especially Nani knowing how to control it.
Mm-hmm.
They're every time like the teachers would see her do it, they would just be amazed, like, you really know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes they would look at her like pretty much trying to figure out where she was going. Um, and even Nani would even teach the teachers new things about the device that they didn't know either.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of they were both teaching each other.
Yeah.
How old is Nani now?
She's 12. They just turned 12.
Wow, 12.
Yeah,
Okay.
they've come a
So
long way.
You mentioned that, or Brenda, you mentioned there was at the time, so she's got a different device, but at the time she had Spanish on her device, her Toby. And at school, they mostly, she used English. Was she using it at home in Spanish? What was that like?
In the home, we actually use both because I'm English, but I also speak Spanish. And then like when we initially got the device, what we were doing is we were kind of just messing around with it, kind of like a kid when they get an iPad or like
Mm-hmm.
any kind of tablet. Um, my dad, once he found out that it was Spanish, he would mess with it too with Nani. They would sit there and kind of just poke at it, trying to
Mm.
figure out like where locations of things are. Just pretty much, oh, well, do you have a dog? Do you have a cat? Do you have a rooster? Like just funny things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and to me now, it I think it was very beneficial for her to use Spanish at such a young age or to have that bilingual piece.
Mm-hmm.
Because now that she's 12, she understands it more fluently.
Mhm.
Right.
And what her teachers have said as well is that she is slowly putting like words together. And she's actually learning how to pronounce certain words from the device itself.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's both in English and the Spanish language.
Mhm.
So just having that device in bilingual, I think is gonna pretty much open a lot of doors later down the road.
Right.
Right.
And your husband, he speaks English. Let me say this. He understands English.
Yes,
But he prefers to speak Spanish. And so,
yes,
and he kind of is the sun and the moon in Nani's eyes. So I think she
yes,
also is super motivated, and so is your dad. So I think she's super motivated to speak Spanish because that gets your dad and your husband's attention, right? They pay attention
yes.
when she's speaking Spanish, right?
Yeah, and Nani actually recently she thinks it's hilarious to talk on the device in English to my dad or my husband. And they're like, "What are you talking about?" They respond back to her in Spanish saying, "What are you talking about?" And she goes on her device, "Never mind." And then
Okay.
she starts the sentence all over again. And then if they don't understand, never mind, just leave it.
Hmm.
Funny.
She's
Okay.
like a
What
sassy 12-year-old now.
what a 12-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Funny.
And then
Um,
the other thing I've noticed too is with the device itself, because it's bilingual, it also helps my husband. he's like slowly learning English because of the use on the device.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
even when she uses it with Nani, or when he uses it with Nani, he tries to use it in the English version.
Mm-hmm.
So that way he tries to speak a little bit better to Nani.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he's kind of gaining some benefits from it because he's also trying to repeat what the device says in English as well.
Right.
Right.
And then they go backwards and they revert to Spanish. And then he's sitting there trying to tell Nani how to say it in Spanish. And then they toggle back into the English form and find it in the English version as well.
Yeah. And so she's on a grid pad 15 with VocoChat and English and Spanish. And so it's like sentence started. So it's like, I want, and then it's like to eat, to play, to go. So there's some phrase-based stuff to put together. So for eye gaze users, she can do 2 or 3 hits and it's a full sentence. So she doesn't have to do word for word. She has other options, and she can, when she was on the accent, she could do the, I don't know if she was on the 60 or she was on the 42 or something. Like, she could do a lot of buttons, but it was laborious to do what word by word. And now that we've got a little more phrase based, we're getting tons out of her. She even had the device not work. And then in Spanish, she puts together, my device isn't working or something. And mom takes a video of that and sends it to me. And I'm like, translation, please. So she told her that my device isn't right. Is that what it said in Spanish?
Yeah.
My device isn't working.
Yes, because we did have issues with the device. It had shut down on us randomly. So
it needed an update.
Yes, it needed the update. And before it did shut off on us, she was able to say, there's something wrong with my device.
So Nani's calling her own tech support at this point.
Yeah, basically. But then
she's going to.
She had surgery last week, and you just told us that she's using it for medical purposes now too, as well.
Yes. So what we didn't take it with us to the hospital, but we had it here at home. We put it on her rolling floor mount that she had by her bed. So what I was doing with her is I pretty much want her to make her own opinions, to do her own choices, pretty much be her own self, because she's already 12 now.
Yeah.
I don't want her to be like too dependent in what she tries to tell me. So I rather let her do it on her own. And one of the phrases that she said was 2 days after we had gotten out of surgery, she said she needed medication. So then I said, okay, so what's hurting? I took her down to the body parts page, and she kept saying hip and knee.
Wow.
So I went back to the yes and no page, and I was like, would you like medication? And she said yes. But then I forgot to take a picture of it. She made another sentence saying, I need medication now, please. So I'm like, okay, give me a minute and I'll give you your medication. And then she went back into the water page and she said, water, please. Because she knows I pretty much flush her medication down with water.
Yeah. So she's advocating for herself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where having the device is kind of a blessing in disguise, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of work, and the positioning's hard, and there's some things about that equipment that's not convenient. But having started so young, she understands that that's her voice for sure. So Jessica, we're going to wrap up, but I want to know a couple of things. I think Sarah, you had a really good question.
Well, we were thinking about some of the assumptions that people made, that you were too young to understand what was going on. They had to talk to you in a different way or rephrase things. There's some assumptions around you needing the interpreter, and kind of maybe because you were too young that they really thought you did need it. So, we're just thinking, I guess we've talked about some things that would have helped, right? Just talk to me, tell me as it is, right? Tell me what I need to know. And you would, and listening to you better, right? What do you want people to know about you, as a young mother with a child with a disability, or maybe with being a Hispanic mother,
Mhm.
any of this that we've kind of talked about today, what would you want people to know?
Well, just one thing that I specifically like learned and like Nani made me do was is pretty much to speak up, not to let them talk to you as if you didn't know like anything at all. Because
Mm-hmm.
the way I was talked to made it seem like I was never in an ER,
Mm-hmm.
never around or exposed to any of that like language,
Mm-hmm.
just because when they initially talked to me, I had talked to my mom, but when I asked her a question, I had originally asked her something in Spanish. I didn't directly go into English.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where the assumption came in regards to the interpreter,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
was because when I talked to my parents, I had talked to them in Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
But when it came to the doctors, that's when I would talk to them in English.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So one thing for me that has stuck with me is to to not let them talk down to you
Mm-hmm.
and to speak up. As much as you're afraid to say anything, you need to say something.
Mm-hmm.
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 Would you have preferred what should the doctors have done differently?
For me and everything I went through would probably be to just talk to me like a normal person. Not because I was 16 or because I was Hispanic or because like the way I looked or whatever. Um, it to me it didn't seem like it was right to do what they did
Mm-hmm.
just based on the assumptions or the way that we were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because of me is like because I talked to my parents a certain way didn't mean that I wasn't gonna understand it a whole different way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. Would you have wanted them to ask you more like about what you need, or like about how you're going to talk to interpret for your dad or whatever? Just be more a little
Um,
transparent with questions.
yeah, for me, I think it would have been if they would have just asked me like directly instead of
Mm-hmm.
trying to go around through my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it would have made things a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And then especially just go straight to the point. Don't try to make things like softer because I know that's what they were trying to do as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's just go straight to the point, talk to me like as if I was a normal person, not anybody that was 16 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And just pretty much talking to me directly. Because
Yeah.
after all, I was Stephanie's mom. I am Stephanie's mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I pretty much held all the rights to her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And even though I had everything, they pretty much took my mom and dad as if they were the parents.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What you interpret now for me when I
Mm-hmm.
do communication device evaluations. And there are times when I feel like there almost every time, frankly, you help me make connections. It seems like so I don't speak Spanish. Well, I don't speak Spanish well. That doesn't keep me from trying, does it, Jessica? Um,
Right.
but what do you feel like you end up hearing yourself say over and over again when we're at the evaluations to put the people at ease when I'm trying to say, hey, I think this eye gaze device is going to work for you, and you can sense that they're feeling the way you were feeling, right? Like, okay,
Mhm.
because you're sometimes you go rogue on me and you just speak Spanish for them for a minute. So what do you
Mhm.
hear yourself saying that seems to be comforting?
Well, when I do the interpretations, I pretty much I start off with everything by the book. But when they say, well, I don't want to do this, or why do we have to do this? I kind of explain from my experience
Mhm.
and how she's used it when she first started, how it is now, and that I think it would be very beneficial for their own child,
Mhm.
just because they say they want their child to be independent. So
Mhm.
that is definitely one route to go into. And I know when I do speak Spanish, it's almost like as if they're part of the family because they speak Spanish.
Mhm.
And I feel myself I feel like I'm more comfortable when I speak in Spanish versus English.
Mhm.
Don't really know why,
Mhm.
but I just do.
Yeah. Well, because I will have said that. Well, I know you want her to be independent and this is how she can do it. And they're like, mm-hmm. And then Jessica says the same thing in Spanish. And they're like, all right, sister, great. Let's do this. Are you going to be my interpreter for the rest of my life? So, I mean, there are some things that I just can't be done. Some things are lost in translation.
Well,
And
yeah. And
Mhm.
hearing from a mom, it sounds like, who's gone through a similar experience is really powerful.
right. It's not just that there's
Yes.
a Spanish speaking person on the phone or on the line or in front of you.
Hmm.
This is a mom of a child that sometimes it's the same device over the years. It's been like, my
Mhm.
daughter uses this device, Jessica's able to say. And then they're like,
Yes.
okay, all right.
Hmm.
So, um,
Well, you're lucky, Brenda, to have Jessica
I
around.
know, I know. I know. I want her to advocate and set boundaries and say no, but then that may mean she says no to me. So I have to work through that.
I don't think I'll ever say no. As much as I try, because look at what I'm doing now.
Yeah, right.
For those of you who don't know Jessica, this is so far out of her comfort zone, and we are so privileged to hear from you and get your such a authentic version of your story. And we love you. I love your daughter. You know this. Actually, I love your whole family. And by the way, her mom likes me now.
Yes, she does.
Finally, huh?
I mean, actually, I think we warmed up pretty good, but yeah, it was funny later for me to hear that your mom was like, who was that white lady? And I was like, man, I went into that since then, since Jessica has shared her story with me, I've gone to evaluations where I've knocked on a door and there's been hesitancy to open up, hesitancy to let me in. And there's a little bit of a language barrier. And I think of you every time, Jessica. And I'm thinking,
Mhm.
none of this behavior right now has to do with them not liking me personally, because they don't know me yet.
Mhm.
Not even hating the device or hating any of that stuff. This is fear. This is learned. I mean, this is justified. If they have not been treated fairly, or if they feel like the language barrier is going to create unfair treatment, the walls are up, and
Yeah,
and and,
some
and
some
we have walls for a
protection.
reason. So
Hmm.
I think the important thing for all of us when we meet anyone that has walls up is not to take those assumptions too far, right? Not that they're not interested, not that they don't care, not that
Mhm.
they don't understand it. It's just that we're all going to be mama bears about our kids. And
Mhm.
you're definitely going to be a mama bear if your child isn't able to advocate for themselves or speak, right? So it's like, I think understanding
Exactly.
where your story is so important for all of us so that we check those assumptions at the door.
Yeah. Thanks so much,
Mhm.
Jessica.
Yeah. Thank you
Yeah,
for
of
coming on.
course.
Okay. Bye.